And we've got sound, and we are ready, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 5:38. This is a special city council meeting of the Seward City Council, November 1st, 2022. And have we reversed the call to, oh, never mind. Officer Ballard, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Tonight's roll call. Calhoun is excused. Wells is excused. DeMoss.
Here.
Finch.
Here.
Osenga.
Here.
Mayor McClure.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. We're at the point for citizen comments on any subject except items scheduled for public hearing. We do not have a public hearing tonight. If you've signed in, you'll be given the first shot, and then others can raise their hands. And you'll have 3 minutes per speaker, 36 minutes total. Madam Clerk, has anyone signed in?
Yes, ma'am. We have one sign in, and it is Jonah Swiderski.
Okay, and would you state your name and inside or outside of the city limits?
Hello, I'm Jonas Swiderski. I'm outside of city limits. And my comments have to do with the paving of Lear Road, or lack thereof, at the moment. Lear Road starting right there off of Ford Avenue. As it continues on, it moves past the Avtech buildings and then reconnects with the highway. Also can be looped into Alameda. Both those roads are unpaved at the time, and the purpose of this really is for the first, let's call it 800 feet of Lear Road. I point that section out specifically because it is the only access to the Alaska Railroad's depot. And I'm very familiar with the Seward City Tours. We're running through that section all summer long. We're moving about 100,000 people over the course of the summer. You've got coaches coming through there directly moving people to the cruise ship and back. All tour businesses that are reliant on any of those railroad passengers are using this road for access. And it is an expensive road to maintain for the city, and it's a real bother for them to be getting phone calls from us saying the potholes are awful, this has got to get improved, or we're losing teeth as we're rattling over this road. It's a constant issue, and it's something that the city should really try to focus on, because it is something that our visitors are experiencing multiple times a day sometimes. Paving a road is not cheap. I've spoken with Doug with Public Works, and we've talked about it. There are difficulties with it, with drainage, with access to utilities through there. There's not a lot of room. It will be a difficult one to try to solve. And I know there is going to be paving next year, so, or at least there's talk about mile 0 through 8, I believe. And so next year would be an ideal time. As far as funding for this would be, I think, an ideal candidate for the head tax funds, the cruise ship head tax funds, as this would be very clearly utilized by cruise ship passengers. I do understand that the head tax fund is rather low at the moment due to the last couple of years, but this is something that the city should have on their radar to try to solve as soon as possible, even if we could do some of the preliminary footwork to understand what the project would entail before funds show up into that after a year maybe or two of full cruise ships passing through. And once those funds are available, then we can actually maybe pull the trigger on it. But this is something I just wanted to put on the radar for everyone. I believe that would do it. I mean, of course, ideally, we continue on through Alameda and service all of that industry down there, which would be a huge help to the community. But anyways, that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. So no one else has signed in?
No, ma'am.
Does anyone else want to speak at this point? Okay, go ahead, Micah, first. You go ahead first.
Hello, I'm Micah Van Buskirk, and I live inside city limits. I have a couple comments not relevant to today's agenda, but I was out of town for the past work session. I usually love to come to these. I missed them all, but I listened to them online, and The first comment I have is one hat that I wear. I am the president of the Seward Schools Site-Based Council. And the Site Council is a group of principals, teachers, staff, parents, and community members from all three of our schools, our elementary school, middle school, and high school. And at our last meeting, we had a discussion about how much we miss and the importance of the school resource officer in our schools. That's a position that's been funded by the city for over 15 years, and it is essential that we get this back into our schools now that the COVID restrictions have gone away, or have largely gone away. We had someone in the schools until COVID started, and that has not come back. There's not been a change, and I know we've been told that it's because of staffing numbers in the police department, and we're waiting to get people trained up, but the police department staff is getting stabilized, and we'd love to see that position get put back into our schools. I sent a letter out earlier to everyone. Our teachers and staff and students have all said and came to Site Council saying that their presence of a police officer in our school building makes them feel safer and reduces disciplinary issues significantly at our three schools. And our teachers and our staff need that support right now, especially after all the changes from COVID. It also increases the relationships between the students and the staff and the police officers. Just having somebody there, someone that they recognize, that smiles to them, gives them a high five as they walk down the hallway is so valuable. It cannot be done any other way to build those community relationships and that trust and respect between the students and the police officers. I put some statistics in the letter that I wrote to you guys, or that we wrote. This was a letter that I wrote for Site Council, but everybody approved it. This year, even in Alaska, there have been some gun incidents that were stopped by school resource officers when kids came into the school with a weapon, and those officers were able to stop any violence from happening in Alaska. So this is a real thing. Nationwide, they say about a third of the cases featuring SROs have a role in either stopping or preventing an attack, and that is very significant. There's a big list of the nationwide organizations. For every dollar invested in the resource officers, 11.3 of social and economic impact. I knew it would go so fast. Oh my gosh. Relationships, they also have been able to do a law enforcement and public safety course, which we really need, and we can grow our own police officers and dispatchers by having these resources in our schools. And read my letter, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, good evening. Skip Ryerson, Inside City Limits. Thank you for your first three budget meetings. I was here in the first one in person, and I watched your other two teleconferences. So thank you very much for the sessions thus far. Tonight is obviously very close to my heart. The hospital fund has been top of my list for years, harbor and electric. So we got the trifecta for me tonight. Finance is the bonus. With respect to the change up from a work session format to the 5-minute commentary at the end, I thought I'd try something different this year. I went through all the budgets, spent countless hours. You'll have to talk to my wife how much time I bullied her out of on the computer over the last 4 weeks. But basically I started off with about 4 pages of comments to bring to council, but I didn't want your eyes to basically gloss over, so I gave you a break and I decided to whittle this down to a baker's dozen. So I'm going to pass this out tonight. These are for your consideration for budget changes or alterations that go forward. You'll have them tonight to be able to ask administration any questions from them. It might help you when you go through each session, since I'll only be able to come up at the end. So hopefully it helps in the conversation. Basic hits the 3 today. I've got basically the hospital, the electric and harbor on here, so there'll be some questions in there and some recommendations. So these are basically my list of recommendations, and I'll pass these along for your use. Here you go, Suli. You still got time? There's one. The other thing that was on my list to talk about, recently I understand that the council may have given administration direction that in your cash flow statements in your budget, the cash flow statements, I understand you had decided to use all cash in an enterprise fund. And I wanted to ask for your reconsideration to think about changing that and going back to the unrestricted fund balance. Unrestricted fund balance will allow continuity in your resolutions. Those are unrestricted fund balances. And by putting all the cash that you might have in an enterprise in here today, it's really kind of inflating what cash is available to do things. The restricted funds include project funds, CPV money in the harbor, for instance, harbor passenger fees. So I'd ask for your consideration to revert back, use only the unrestricted fund balance in those. So I'll pass those out for your use as well. And thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak at this point? Sure.
Laura Schneider, Inside City Limits. I came here tonight to speak about the harbor budget. I'd like to speak specifically to the request for a new harbor worker, and I'd like to support that wholeheartedly. A few reasons for this. I've advocated for this for a few years. When the washdown pad was put in across the bay on the 315-ton lift, that took the number of lifts that could happen over there from, I believe, 4 down to 2. Seems like so long ago, I forget now. But that is because now the lift is actually used up during the time that it takes for the washdown. Whereas before the washdown pad existed, it would be lifted out of the water, goes straight to being blocked, and then the pressure washing happens when the city no longer has any involvement. Now that the boat has to be lifted, taken to the washdown pad, and they wait, sometimes, I was on a lift the other day where they took 4.5 hours to pressure wash the boat. Because of that kind of inconsistency, they only schedule 1 lift in the morning and 1 lift in the afternoon at Smith. There's a washdown pad in the works for this side of the bay. There are currently 6 lifts a day. I can only imagine that's going to have to go down to 4 at the very least, with some cancellations when the washdown takes longer than expected on vessels on this side of the bay. With the harbor staffing how it is, they can only operate 1 lift at a time. So there is already a backlog, with there only being 1 lift at SMIC. So just for some context, if there's a lift at SMIC in the morning on the 315, there are no 50-ton lifts in that morning. So there can either be in a day 6 50-ton lifts, one 315-ton lift with 3 50-ton lifts in the afternoon, or vice versa, or there can be 2 of the 315-ton lifts. This creates a huge logjam in the spring and in the fall when working boats are trying to get in and out of the water to do the work that they need to do already with the number of lifts that we have. When this new washdown pad goes in, it's only going to get worse. With harbor staffing how it is right now, like I said, they cannot operate both lifts at the same time, and I really feel that in order to serve the harbor customers in a timely manner and for people to be able to do the work that they need to do and to get out fishing when they need to get out fishing and making money with their boats, those lifts have to be able to operate concurrently. So I strongly advocate for that. Also, I hadn't planned to talk about this, but I'd also like to support Jonah's idea for paving. I have a business on Alameda. I agree that Lear is way more important. That's where the money should go first. But if it happens that Alameda could be lumped into that, there are 2 boat yards on Alameda Road, and sometimes that road is so bad the lift will not operate until they come and grade it. In the winter time, often they can't get the road good enough to use it for weeks at a time. It is not conducive to business. It's not good for customers. It's also extremely dangerous and hard on our vehicles all year long going down that road. It's full of incredibly deep potholes. But thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'd like a motion and second to approve the agenda and the consent agenda.
I move to
approve the agenda and the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're ready to vote on that.
Voting on the approval of tonight's agenda and consent agenda, Osenba,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
Finch,
Yes.
Mayor McClure.
Yes.
Your agenda and consent agenda are approved, and you have no items on consent.
Okay, thank you. So now we're moving to new business, which will put us into moving into a committee of the whole to discuss the 2023-2024 City of Seward budget. We'll have presentations. At this point, as I've done for the last several, what I've done is, if you haven't been watching or present, after each presentation, people can speak if they want on that particular presentation. We'll have like 5 minutes per person if you need that much time. So that'll be allowed, and we're going to begin with finance, but first I'd like Assistant City Manager Sewell to say something. Go ahead, hit it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A few things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Move to go into committee as well to
You're right.
discuss the budget 2023-24.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, and we need to vote on this. I always forget that part. Voting on this, please.
Voting on the motion to move into committee of the whole, Osenga,
Yes.
Finch,
Yes.
Dumas.
Yes.
Mayor McClure.
Yes,
That motion is approved. You're moving into committee at 5:54 p.m.
5:54. Thank you very much. I would have gotten there now, Mr. Sewell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a few things, and then I'll turn it over to Deputy Finance Director Sully Jacino to talk about finance. So we have MC Pell on the phone with us this evening. He's with Carmen Jackson CPA. And MC will be covering the healthcare budget and the motor pool budget. Sully will be covering finance, and then Rob and Nora will be covering their respective budgets. I want to apologize ahead of time if we don't have answers to all of your questions, but we'll bring back answers to those questions at a subsequent meeting. And then I briefly want to talk about healthcare. MC is going to be covering this, but I just want to let you guys know that the city manager is really taking a deep dive into the Providence and Mountain Haven topic. We've had 2 operating agreements with Providence, one in 1996 and then one in 2013. The 2013 operating agreement has had 5 amendments that were made to it, and this is a topic that council needs to really dig into deeply, and that's going to be outside of the time that you guys have available to you this evening. 30 minutes is not going to be enough to peel back all the layers on the onion on the healthcare and Mountain Haven, and there's some policy decisions that the city manager wants to talk to you guys about at a future meeting that have some budget implications as well. And so I guess I would just ask ahead of time that we keep that in mind as we dig into the healthcare budget. So I'll turn it over to Sully, and she'll start with finance, and that is on page 37 and 38.
Thank you, Stephanie. Hi, good evening. My name is Sully Jacino. I want to introduce myself. I'm a mother of 4. I currently have 1 bachelor degree in business administration, in marketing, and a minor in management. I'm currently finishing my master's degree in finance as well. So my background is mostly for a bank industry down in Puerto Rico, where I come from. I live in Seward since 2014. I want to introduce myself there. The finance budget is very straightforward. We're starting with the personnel cost, where we are defunding the finance director position and allocating those expenses in the contracted services for Carmen Jackson firm. Also, you can see a little bit of increase of the overtime, and this is due to the lack of employees and the constantly turns over in the department. So that's why one of the reasons for that increase. If you have any more questions about the personnel cost, please.
Are there questions about personnel? Go ahead, Councilmember Dumas.
Thank you. I've got one question. Can you remind me what the finance director's salary was last at, or what we're advertising it at?
It's a grade, if I may.
Yes.
It's at a grade 13.
Okay.
So that's, and I could pull that up for you right if you give me just a minute and give you the exact range, but it's at the highest tier.
Is the high, yeah.
Okay.
And all. I guess the one thing to add to what Sully was saying, so we didn't budget in 2023 for the finance director position, which is why you see the 380,000 under 7009 contracted services. But the opposite is true for 2024. You know, we're optimistic that we'll be able to hire a finance director, and we'll continue to utilize Carmen Jackson CPA, but just at a lower level
Bless you.
in 2024.
Bless you.
Dang it.
And if you give me just a minute, I'll pull up that wage, Liz.
Follow-up question to that or another one?
And then so under 2023, that is what we're anticipating our contracted services to cost without a finance director. And I'm assuming that, do we know what we're gonna end up at in 2022 for the contracted services? I'm wondering if it's gonna be quite a bit higher just because of catch-up and things that we had to do with extra services. I'm just wondering if,
Our actual numbers for that line item is 342,000.
oh, okay, thank
So
you.
we are expecting to have that in '23.
And to answer your question, the finance director position tops out at 121,745.
May I have
Okay,
one more?
yeah, go ahead, Councilmember
Thank you, I
DeVos.
promise it's my last one. I guess I was wondering if, so the 380,000, do you believe that that is the firm doing basically all of the work that the finance director would be doing, but that's just a higher rate that they,
That's correct.
Okay.
They also assisting in our audit too, and then they are doing our budget for 2023, 2024. Is more than what the finance director do.
right, okay, great, thank you so much.
Other questions?
So when the finance director comes on board, are we dropping that company or are we maintaining them?
We are maintaining for consulting services. That's the reason that we budgeting for 50,000. Just to get it in place, this new finance director for.
One more question.
Councilmember Finch?
I know in the past, they used to have, for each department, a rollout to show the more specific breakdowns of each category. Is that still feasible?
Yes.
So
Yes.
you're asking for like a detailed breakdown of what goes into each line item, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
Like for vendors or?
for the whole city. I mean, each department's got everything in a category, but what's the breakdown of that?
I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, go ahead. When you're ready. Go ahead.
Thank you. We talk about 7009. I would like to talk about 97216, 7217, or those are allocated into the new line item for 7022, the software. So it's not that amount in it. It should be less than that. We are allocating AccuFund software and other software that we use in the electric department, the iTron, which is the meter readings, do under that line, under the 7022. And for the 7302, 7303, I would like to, so currently I'm a member of the board of the Alaska Government Finance Association, and I would like to represent SUAR more with my employees as well. So I proposing to have all of my employees going to the conference for next year and 2024 as well. One employee to go for a PERS training is much needed. We have a new technician in payroll, so we probably need the training for it. 2 employees to go for the Harris training as well, and also the iTron, which is our meter readings software that we are going to use. And I think that's all that I have. If you guys have any questions.
Okay, other questions for Sally? No? Okay. No questions?
Okay, that's all we've got for finance.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that was finance. Does anyone wish to comment from the public on that? Okay, well, we were behind, now we're catching up. We're down to healthcare, and
And MC should be on the
phone was going to present on healthcare, and could we give the people a page number? I'm having to look it up, or I can look it up.
Healthcare is on page 163.
163, if you have your budget. Thank you. There. And MC, are you?
Go ahead, MC.
Okay. All right, so the hospital is on pages 163 through 169 in the budget document, two separate funds. As the Assistant Study Manager mentioned earlier, we're budgeting these funds based on the current operating agreement. So these will be subject to change if the city were to go and try and do something different with the operating agreement, as you mentioned, but we're not going to get into anything with that this evening. This is just based on the current agreement and how it's operating. So the hospital is a little different. For those of you that might not be quite as familiar, the city owns the hospital and the Seward Mountain Haven facility, but it's operated by Providence Health and Services. So what you see in the budget is just the costs that are actually directly allocated to the city, their direct costs. The operation of the hospital, the actual daily operations of the hospital that Providence runs, you won't see those ins and outs in the budget. But those are done by Providence, basically trued up to the city on an annual basis, and with reporting every quarter that's done to the city to kind of keep tabs on what's going on there and more often. So there's not a whole lot to what the city actually budgets for the hospital and the Seward Mountain Haven. So, but I will go through that. The biggest things you're going to see on page 164, there's a transfer in going into the hospital of $1,625,000. That represents 25% of the city sales tax revenue, so that comes out of the city's general fund and goes into the hospital fund to help fund those operations. And then the debt service expense in the hospital fund represents an interfund loan between the hospital and the motor pool fund of the city. So that's the interest related to the repayment of that loan that the hospital received to help pay off their PERS long-term liability 7 years ago. So that's really the main activity in the hospital fund. Are there any questions on that?
Any questions? No? No questions yet.
Okay. Okay, so that's it. Then moving ahead to Seward Mountain Haven. That's on page 167. You do see some operations ins and outs here that the city does partake in with. They get some patient revenue on a monthly basis, and then they pay over. The city pays over an amount for capital funds over to the Seward Mountain Haven. They also have bonds outstanding at the end of the year, so that the city is responsible for the repayment of those bonds. As of the end of 2022, there would be about $13,350,000 of bonds still outstanding at Seward Mountain Haven that the city is responsible for paying off. And you'll see those debt service principal and interest payments on there as well. So that along with the depreciation of the assets are the biggest expenses in that fund. So are there any questions on Seward Mountain Haven?
Any questions from council? I don't see any.
Okay, well, I really got you guys caught up on time. Like I said, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes at the hospital, but what the city actually needs to budget for is pretty limited.
Okay. You have anything else?
Thank you, MC.
Wow. Okay, council, did you have any questions for administration or anything on this before, on healthcare? Okay, members of the public? So basically you get 5 minutes on this topic if you need all 5.
Thanks.
And the clerk will time you on this.
That's great.
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've been a budget hawk on our healthcare system for over 20 years. So I've monitored that. I've done deep dives. I've been working with Providence and the city since June to try to get to the bottom of our financial affairs. Glad to hear the city is elevating that enterprise and taking a deeper look into it. The 3 items I put on my list today, if you look at one of them, on page 160, what was it? 165, one of my asks was on the pass-through payments on page 165, $687,000. In the past, that's tied to the capital request for equipment. As a city, we own all the equipment in both Providence and Mountain Haven. In the event that Providence walks, we own the equipment, we can bring a new operator in and manage those facilities. I haven't seen a CIP for 2013, 2014. I would appreciate administration presenting that because that 687 just looks like it's a carry forward from 21, 20, and 2022. Also suggested in here in the hospital fund, if you look on page 166, there's 3 funds we basically have. We have a hospital, what we call a hospital fund. We have a building enterprise fund with about $1 million in it. The hospital fund just came out of a deficit position. We bought the $1.3 million piece of equipment up at the hospital, CAT scan again. We just got done paying that off. We're in a positive position, you can see there. But as we generate this 1.6 in sales tax in there, really is it necessary to have this level of cash? Well, at the end of 23, we'll end up with $2 million. At the end of 24, almost $3 million. There really isn't any need to sit on that cash in that account. And so I made a couple suggestions in here. One, we could take $800,000. Our goal is to basically fund the bonds that we have due out to 2033. We're only going to have a few more years, folks, of revenue coming in for the bonds, and that's basically on page 168, as MC pointed out. The 3-point-some million that we're getting in, those are bond payments that were being made on a basis. Census times a daily rate equals a monthly that they're paying us. This is the capital cost for the building that we paid $30 million for. But that depreciation schedule is going to run out far in advance of the bond payments. So we're going to need to basically focus on getting not only the $13 million that MC mentioned, that's the capital principal portion. We've got debt service to go along with that. So our liability is somewhere probably north of $17 million. Just something to keep in mind what that line item is. So it's monies that are due to us. As long as the census is strong and the rebase rate for the capital portion of that asset is strong, we'll get enough funds in there. But it's coming to an end quickly. I mentioned the surplus money, what to do with that. Talked about using some of the surplus money to keep putting that money over into the bond fund. That's the 3rd fund that you have in the books. It's the bond reserve fund. It's about $10 million in there now. So if we can keep putting money in there from this fund, and that comes from an appropriation from you. So when you look at lining these proceeds up, you can move money in. You can also move money out of that fund. It's a reserve fund that you control. I'd like to see us also pay down the PERS debt from the old hospital liability. That's been hanging around us. It'd be nice to clean up some of these things that are from the past. Probably no need to keep paying on that thing. I can't remember if the motor pool or electric, or maybe Norm. I can't remember which one of the enterprises we borrowed money from to pay that PERS liability off. But I think it's about $500,000. So hopefully these suggestions resonate with you, but you need the CIP before you can pass this budget, I think. Otherwise, you're putting a place marker for $687,000 in there. We don't know if that's enough. The last thing, I run out of time, is surplus proceeds. If you want to talk more about surplus cash that's sitting in Providence's books that really is owned by us. Remember, they manage that asset for us. If they're sitting on $3 million, it's not theirs to spend. It's an enterprise fund. We need to be looking at getting that funds and putting it inside of the reserve fund balance also, and giving Providence, $500,000 or $1 million in working capital to as a line of credit, which they have $500,000 on the books right now at the city. You have it under your, you have it in your general fund. There's $500,000 for that. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on healthcare? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the Harbor and SMIC. And page 88, I see. And we have our harbor master here.
Good evening, council, public. So we're going through, the harbor did a big change this year in our budget. So we combined a bunch of different, we had floats, electric, North Dock. We combined them so the numbers are gonna look weird from the past. So that's why the numbers really look weird, because we combined a few of those departments together on both sides of the bay. So, I'm talking with MC today, our if I can find it real quick. Our depreciation expenses are a little off. So he's gonna go back and look at them. They're really kind of high from what they used to be. So he's gonna look at those and come back with some different numbers.
Which ones, I'm sorry?
What's that?
Which ones did you say?
The depreciation for all the accounts that are kind of high, especially across the bay at SMIC. They're super high, so. And then going through, like Boris was saying, asking for that other position. So touch on that a little bit. We have a 2-week waiting list or more to get boats in and out, and these guys want to go, and they can't go right away unless we have a cancellation. We do a big list. We're going to be running 7 days a week, and 2 lifts can't do it with the people we have. So we need one more, and we can do it. It'll be tough, but we can do it. A lot better than we can with 5 people. Right now, the deputy harbor master will go out, or I'll go out. If a guy has to go, we'll get emergency lift or whatever, we'll jump on that. And then just going through, pretty much, we have 3 new people in the harbor, so we got a lot of training coming up. New deputy harbor master, lots of training, so that's why our training expenses are up a bit. And I know Doug talked about the CDLs, got really expensive really quick. So something we have to take, we're sending one guy next week to try to spread it out. So. And I'll take any questions for the harbor side, and then we can move over to SMIC.
Questions about the harbor, council? Councilmember DeVos?
Just about the position, the additional position. So is that, will that additional position just be doing kind of like everything else that the harbor guys are doing right now? Just
correct, to be an additional harbor worker too, and you'll be doing boat lifts, you'll be doing maintenance, you'll be logging floats, everything.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Need a minute. No questions? Okay.
Okay, so we'll move over to SMIC.
Page what? I know. Okay. Page 107? Really? No.
So again, on the SMIC side, we combine, sorry, got it? Okay. So on the SMIC side, like I said, we combined everything within the SMIC basin. Now it's called SMIC Basin. Before we had North Dock, East Dock, Single Lift Dock. And so we kind of combined it for all the floats in one thing. And then we moved the storage fees out of the 330-ton budget and put it into the Harbor General. So that's what you see the big increase there. We just moved it to keep it away from the machine, I guess. And one thing I did add at SMIC, I did add that $50,000 motor pool fund. I think that we need to start saving money to pay for a machine in 25 years or so. So it's a good time to start with the revenues being up at SMIC. I could just come up with 50 grand. You know, if it's too much, we can adjust it. But I'm thinking that that's where we need to start at anyways. And there was one item in here. There was a big increase in 23. We're going to try to add a water line to the end of in the back end of SMIC there to help out with the boat, you know, people wanting water in the back. So right now they have to run garden hoses all the way to the back. So, and that's why we put that in the 23 budget. I'll take any questions for SMIC.
Any questions from council? I have one on page 109, the SMIC power sales. Could you explain again why it went from 138,000 in 2022 to 90,000 for the next 2 years?
So that was, maybe MC can answer that one.
MC, do you have an answer for
why it was so much higher in 2022?
Yeah, I guess that's the question, right, because it came back down.
I might be able to touch on it too, that might help them out. So, Jag had a boat that on the dock, they used a lot of electricity, a lot. So that's where the big jump was.
Oh,
okay. So that's why he just dropped it back down, but they drew a lot of electricity and so I can't remember what it was, but it was a lot.
So
there was a large payment early in the year that was out of the normal frame of business, so we didn't expect that to actually repeat in 2023 and 2024, so we dropped it back down to more of the historical norm as far as the budget.
Okay, thank you. That just stood out. Any other questions of the Smith? Yes, Councilmember Finch.
I guess monthly slip fees, are those paid by checks or credit cards? Or how much do you probably estimate lose a year on credit card fees?
So mostly everybody would pay with a credit card. We do get some POs from some bigger companies. They'll do a PO, or a fisherman will ask, I'll say Seward Fisheries, for a PO to pay for the lifted or moored and stuff if they're behind. And then they'll issue us a PO, but mostly everything's done with a credit card.
How much do you estimate you're losing a year on credit card fees?
So the harbor's about $68,000 to $70,000 a year we pay in credit card fees. That's just the harbor, not electric pays more, campgrounds, they all pay more, I know years ago, I can't remember how many years, but it's been a while, we did bring it before council to maybe add a credit card fee. You can pay by check, you can pay by cash if you want, but to add a credit card fee and it didn't pass back then, I don't remember why. It was voted down, of course, but personally, the way right now, everybody's starting to charge fees for using a credit card. I just think, we can, I don't know, cap it at a certain amount or just do it from $0.
We had talked about that with the camping and doing something about a different situation, so that might just go across the board then if we get to that point, because, it's substantial
I think
amount
the whole
of-
city is over $400,000.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what came out in a previous session, if people didn't hear, just for fees that we pay. So, it's a thing, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from council? Don't see any right now. That's it? Gone? Okay, hold on. That wraps up Harbor. So if anyone wants to speak to that, you have your 5 minutes. And then, Rob, then you get your shot. I know, we're still running ahead here, so,
Skip Ryerson. A couple things that are void might help Sue Lee and you folks as well, just make some suggestions. back in 2021, so a lot of the work that I do, I go back and look at historical budgets, budget formats. You enjoyed what, in your packets, what usually is called a roll-up. It rolls up fire department, it rolls up harbor, it rolls up electric. And I think if you have that as a tool, it would allow you to cut through a lot of the detailed sheets that you're looking at. So I end up looking at that. I end up also having to do this year, because to get to your cash flow, you have your P&L, and then you jump to your cash flow. And one of the documents that was instrumental in linking your P&L to your cash flow is your, what we call the statement of net position. And we don't have that this year. And I'll share with you that if you look at your cash flow statement on page 106, and I'm really a cash guy, I pull out depreciation, I'm usually hunting down cash issues. And if you notice, most of the things on my baker's dozen here usually are the stuff that's 200 grand and up. So in on 106, you'll notice a line item that says change in net position. In the past, you had a net position statement that showed you where you can get that number. And you might be missing that, so if you're trying to connect the dots on where is that number coming from, because it's what's adding to your cash flow every year. And so you're starting there at that level. And while you're on page 106, I asked you earlier for reconsideration on using all cash. This $6.5 million in the harbor fund is all the cash that Norm has in that harbor fund, including the projects, including the grants, including the cruise ship passenger fees, all which are restricted. If you remember, we were here last year talking about this particular topic when you thought you had about $5 million in Norm's budget for its projects, and we almost wrote a check into a negative last year. So it's something that I can't emphasize enough. Focusing on unrestricted cash. It's the only cash that you as council could really spend on appropriations and resolutions going forward. So net position would be helpful. And in my deep dive in a net position statement for the harbor, it became apparent that the harbor passenger fees are not in your budget. And so I would respectfully ask Finance and MC to take a look at if that fund, which is about 600 grand a year in harbor passenger fees, whether it's made it into the budget or not. I couldn't find it, any reference to it. And it's a little bit of a beast because it's set up into a different fund. The revenues come into a different fund in your fund accounts. And at the end of the year, or during the year, you pay off your bond. It pays off your harbor bonds for those docks. And so it pays those off. And unless those funds are transferred over into the operating account, then Norm's just paying for the bonds, but he's not getting reimbursed from the harbor fund. So 600 grand is something you might want to take a look at, hunting that down. Also, while we're on the parking and harbor, I couldn't locate anywhere in the budget where the $733,000 loan from the parking for the northeast launch ramp that we passed back in 2021. I didn't see a debt schedule. And again, I didn't see a debt schedule at all. So it was very hard for me to determine what are we looking at debt schedule wise. It was a document that was in your previous budget. So it's something that you really should ask for to include because it links things together as well. So I'd ask that we take a look and see if that loan wasn't calculated, then Norm's got some more interest to pay, or based on my bar napkin math, after his projects are all done this year, he may have enough money in there just to repay that 733 back before the 2023 budget year starts. So he can be a little skinny over there for money, but he'll be debt free, and I think that's a good thing to have too. So thank you much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on harbor? Okay.
Madam Mayor, if I may, just while the conversation surrounding credit card fees was going around, I pulled it up, and just for council's awareness, in this budget, we've got $319,278 in credit card fees listed across the entire operating budget.
So we need to do something about that. Okay. Anything else All right, I guess we'll move on to electric then. You've got way lots of time now. You can.
Sure,
You can,
I'll just
you can
stay
take up
all
2
night long.
hours if you want.
Yeah, no, not a
We
problem.
can't hear enough about electric.
Anyway, I will cover some brief notes before we get into the budget. When I started in 2021, we had 11 different call centers or departments within the overall electric budget. We were able to combine 2 of those this year, so basically eliminating 2 call centers. Last year, we eliminated 3 call centers, so we have gone from 11 call centers within the department down to 6 as we tried to simplify things. So anyway, with that said, also some things you'll see in the budget, if you look, especially like materials, supplies, those have been increased. Other numbers have been increased just to account for inflation that we're seeing. And then in 2022, we have been spending some money for our relocation of poles and lines in Moose Pass through the Alaska Department of Transportation. We will be getting reimbursed for those numbers, and we just turned over an invoice to finance this week for about $601,000 that will be reimbursed for that. If we can, we'll start with the electric operations combo budget.
Could you give us a page number just for the public?
Julie, what's that page number?
131.
131. 131.
Or even for us?
All right. Just a couple of things to note. If you look in the top column, the personnel cost, you can see we've got basically $386,000 that's year to date. That seems low. So just so you know, we updated that. I'm sorry, if you look in the 2022 actuals in the total personnel cost, you will see that we're at $386,000. Okay. That number is actually, we've gotten the most recent, and it's now $802,000 approximately. All right, if you go down into the non-personnel cost and look at contracted services, which is 7009, if you scroll over to the 2022 budget, you will see $925,287. That number is incorrect. I'm not sure why it's incorrect, but the actual number is $356,654. And then if you go over to the next column, you will see $44,676. That number is now $120,000. And then if you look at what we've budgeted in 23 and 24, we've budgeted $325,000 in each of those years. This is where we do get most of our contracting work and consultant work done. We will be looking at doing a rate study in 2023. So those costs are considered. All of our engineering design work is included in there, as well as some of the technology consulting that we need as we go into each year. If you look at utilities, 7015, what we were able to do this year is we had utilities spread into 3 different call centers previously. We have now combined all of those within the electric operations combo. That's more or less for your electric costs for both the annex and Fort Raymond, the warehouse, and the various other facilities. Okay. Let's see. If you look down to the software and subscriptions, 7022. I've heard Sully mention earlier, Itron, also Harris Software. Those are our service fees that we pay each year. So that's more or less a new line item. That's why I pointed out. Go down to the fuel for generators, 7103.
That number, that's the year-to-date actual, is right at 47,000. That's the fuel we use for running the generating plant. We typically are running it just for a few hours each month for testing purposes. Haven't had to run it nearly as much as we have in the past for power outages.
Could I ask a question
Yes.
right there, so we don't have to go back? So then why is it so much for 2023 and 2024?
Because typically we do run it more for power outages. And if you look at traditionally, now you look at the years before, some of that funding was in other cost centers.
Okay.
So we've combined it into this one.
This
Okay.
also then?
Correct. All right. And then I'm going to move down to the operating materials, 7221. That is a new line item within this budget. We were paying for a lot of materials out of our operating supplies before, so you'll see that line item went down considerably, and we've gone up with this new line item. Turn over to the next page for me. I don't know if it's the next page for you. Advertising 7300. Actually, it's at the bottom of the page you're on. Sorry about that. Yeah, you can see in 2023 we put in 12,000. Really, that was in the event that we need to do any kind of advertising while we're doing the infrastructure work. As well as if we do some additional advertising related to the potential utility cell. Okay? And I'll flip it over. In this section, the last thing, travel and education. The travel and education in this particular cost center is designated for our 7 union employees. We really did not utilize a whole lot of it this year. We do hope to change that. Our industry is changing all the time, especially around technology, and I want to make sure that our employees are staying current with the training that they need. Okay, we can turn over to electric administration. Suzie, what page is that?
134.
Or what was it?
134.
134? All right, in the electric administration budget, if you look at line item 7006, legal, we budgeted 45,000 in there. Really, that was more to anticipate if we needed additional legal support if we go forward with the utility cell. I'm not sure that we would need that amount in 2024, so we could actually lower that. And then, really the next thing I have for this particular one is the travel and education. In this particular cost center, we're budgeting for the 3 office employees, including myself. Again, did not use a lot of that this year, but I'm in Anchorage usually a couple of times a month for meetings. Also I've got 3 conferences, 2 out of state that, I would normally attend, and for other reasons was not able to do so this year, but I hope to do so next year. Okay. And then the last one here I'll point out is 8104, which is the motor pool. We've spent a fairly significant amount here in the past few years, catching up on getting trailers, getting our vehicles up to date, and we also purchased the large excavator that we now can use to help us maintain our right-of-ways. We're down to basically 1 vehicle that we still need to update. In the budget, I think we've got it as 70,000 for 2023 and 2024. I really only need 70,000 in one of those 2 years. I think we can push it to 2024, so we can eliminate 70,000 in the motor pool. Okay. And if we turn over to the electric transmission operations and maintenance, page Julie,
137.
137. Okay. Really, the only couple of notes from this one that I'll point out is if you look at contracted services 7009, we've got 500,000 set aside. This is for our ongoing tree clearing effort. I think you guys have seen the results that we've had over the past 2 years. We've had fewer outages as a result of that work. We really have only one more year before we're going to be caught up with our right-of-way. And at that point, we will be able to use our crews with our excavator to maintain them. So there will be cost savings there, and that's why you see 500,000 in '23, but nothing budgeted in '24. Okay. And then also, I'll just point out our rents and leases. Some people may wonder what that is. We try to keep some money in that account as well. In the event we need to rent some sort of equipment that we don't have. A good example would be, because we have so much bedrock here, we sometimes have to use a rock saw for our trenching to put underground cable in. And so that would be an example of that. All right, we'll turn over to the electric distribution operations and maintenance. Now with this particular account, we moved a great deal of this over to the electric operations combo. The only thing we did keep in here is a line item under the non-personnel cost or operating supplies. And that is because we do order materials specific to our distribution operations. But everything else we feel like we can capture in the electric operations combo budget. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, and that's really it for that one, unless you guys have a question.
I actually have this probably odd one on page 139, the electric distribution operations and maintenance, 6,000, the salaries. So what portion of whose salary does that salary of 13,000 something cover, or what is that?
Our linemen, they have different account codes when they're doing their timesheets.
Right.
So based on the work they're doing in the field, whether it's related to the transmission, whether it's related to distribution, it gets charged off to those various accounts. Okay?
Someone asked me that, so I'm passing on the question.
Not a problem. And then the next cost center is our wholesale power cost. Julie, page number? 140. Thank you. That is what it is. That's what we pay Chugach Electric for the power that we buy from them. Okay. And then the last one we have here is 3007. This is the electric work orders. All right. Basically what we did here again is we kept everything in the salaries so that our employees can charge off appropriately for the work they're doing. But we were able to close out everything in the non-personnel cost, and we moved some of those over to the electric operations combo. And a few of those just we didn't need any longer because of process improvements, some of the line items under the non-personnel cost.
Questions from council on this? It's a lot. We just want to keep the generators working, that's all.
I agree
We
with
love
that.
our generators.
If they don't work at some point, then I'm going to leave. I'll get calls from you guys.
They're important.
All right.
Any questions? That was very thorough. Good. And that was it? You've got so much more time.
I know.
Okay. No more questions, comments from council on electric? Then public, if you have a comment, you get your 5 minutes on this.
I was going to take his extra time.
I shouldn't have mentioned
Hey,
it.
quick shout out, sorry to to the family of Jim Pruitt. We lost a legend in our community, I understand, so Jim passed away. A lot of history there with Jim. Wanted to just touch on a couple things. Big enterprise in our community, electric. One, I did get together with Rob, talked a little bit, didn't understand what he was doing there in 2014 on tree clearing. We went from 500,000 to nothing, and it sounded like we're going to use the crew. I was going to, obviously my item in here was to start building a tree clearing fund like the motor pool fund, because I think we burned through 800 grand this year, and about 800,000 bucks with Alaska Tree Service this year alone. Really want to emphasize and try to get you to reinstate the $300,000 right-of-way transfer fee that was pulled out. We cannot be balancing our budgets by shifting large six-digit numbers to try to balance a budget. I've said a year ago at this dais, when we're going to pass a $20 million infrastructure project, we're going to have a rate increase. We haven't got the rate study done yet, but it's really not fair here to just not fund the transfer of that funds to the general fund, which the general fund has been relying on those for probably a couple decades. If you want to know more, we can talk about that, but not in my 5 minutes. Also, for just a housekeeping item on the cash flow, I think the bond payments, the principal for the old bond payments was at 190. Those need to be updated for the debt schedule. The interest expense, but I did find you some money, Rob. We prepaid in our bond issuance for the 10 million. We prepaid $499,000 of prepaid interest. So you're not going to have to pay $220,000 this year out of 23 budget. You're going to get that back, so that needs to be added back in as a source on the cash flow statement. So look at that cash flow statement for 2023. And my last item, and I got 3 minutes, yahoo. I brought to your attention the proposal I handed out to you regarding the cash flow statement itself. You can see in there that we don't have $8.4 million in the electric fund. We really have 1.79 that's unrestricted. So I kind of gave you a look at what's restricted and unrestricted. So again, I'm trying to keep us focused on the unrestricted number. And the last thing I wanted to share with you tonight, there was a comment recently made that if we don't find more money or do things with money, we're going to have to tap into the general fund to pay for the phase 1 and phase 2 of the project for our electric utility. And I'm going to pass out a proposal that I've got for you for your consideration. Maybe not in your budget, but it's kind of germane to the fact. Phase 1, phase 2, I'll wait for you to get this so you can follow along. Hold by 5 minutes, please. Phase 1 and phase 2, excluding the harbor, is $17.3 million. Right now, the sources of funds that we have, we've got the bond, which is net of the proceeds that we paid out for the reserve and the interest. We've got 566 from an old appropriation back in 2013. We're still waiting for 577 from the borough for an ARPA grant that we put in for back in 2021. We've got 957,000 in our MRF fund. And here's where the kicker gets interesting. SMIC had losses for years. And the electric utility, the council at that time anointed the electric utility to pay for those losses at SMIC. Right now, there's a balance on your book in that loan balance of $1,053,000. I'm recommending for the next 3 years, you put in your budget $335,000 to repay the electric fund for the $1,053,000. And then all we need from the proceeds of our funds in bank is 5.1, which we've got. That'll leave us $1,003,000 in the utility, and that's how we pay for the 17.3. So hopefully we don't have to tap into the general fund, and this will, I guess, get some discussion with administration and electric since it's a new item. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wanting to speak about electric? Going once, going twice. Council, do you have any comments before we move on? May I ask if we need a break yet? Are we good to go on? We're good to go? Okay. Administration.
We'll turn it over to MC and go over motor pool.
Yes, thank you. So the motor pool fund starts on page 170, I believe, of your document, or 171, where you actually get into the numbers. And just a little background on what the motor pool fund is and what its purpose is. This was established by the city many years ago now, several years ago now, and it's really showed a lot of foresight by the city. So this is what's called the internal service fund. So all this fund exists really only to provide service within the city. Money comes in from different departments of the city, and it sits there until something needs to be purchased. So this was established so that departments throughout the city could pay in advance for the depreciation on their vehicles and related equipment, so that as they're being used, as they're being depreciated, they're paying annual amounts into this motor pool fund that would then save, earn a little interest on it, and then when the vehicle needs to be replaced, the money's sitting there, ready to go, ready to purchase the vehicle, so that the city doesn't run into any cash flow issues if there is a major expense that needs to be made, and they don't have to borrow funds to buy any vehicles. And this has been really successful, and as we've been going through the budget over these last several meetings, you see most of the departments have a motor vehicle rent line. And what that is that's their portion that they're putting into this fund, but then this fund holds it, and then when they need to go out and replace the vehicle, they have the money sitting there able to do that. So when you see on page 172, when you get a little more of the line item detail of the budget, coming in this year, there's about $586,000 budgeted of motor vehicle run. I know there's going to be a few changes based on some of the previous meetings, some of the discussions we had, so that'll probably change a little bit. Some increases and some decreases in some of the departments as to what needs to go into here. And then currently budgeted for the capital equipment down on the bottom. So that's what the CIP schedule shows for what they're going to need to replace in 2023 is about $735,000 worth of vehicles, and then $377,000 worth of vehicles in 2024. So, and the good news with the motor pool fund is that it has been very successful. There's quite a lot of money that's been stored up in there, right around $4 million at the end of 2022. We're anticipating as far as cash in that fund. So there is quite a bit of reserve there. If any vehicles do break, the city has the ability to purchase those without getting into any sort of cash flow situation, without having to borrow those funds. So that's really all there is to that fund. But yeah, so if there are any questions.
Are there questions? That was a good explanation. Some people don't really understand the motor pool very well, and I think that kind of covered it well. Questions from council? Okay, there are none. Do you have, administration, do you have anything more to offer, MC? No?
Anything else, MC?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay.
Thank you, MC.
Yeah, Harbor Master, what you got?
Yes, Council, I wasn't sure if there was a list of vehicles put out there, but I put in the vehicle for 2024, another oil truck that totes our oil tanker around. I just wanted to, it's old, it's been hauling oil for over 12 years now, and it just needs to be replaced. So I don't know if you have a list of vehicles, but I just want to talk about my vehicle that needs to be replaced. It should have been for 2024. Yeah, so I don't know if they have a list or not, but I didn't see it. So
we'll get
that.
Just talking about it.
Yeah, I do have the list, and I can provide that to council, and the oil truck is on there, I believe for $80,000.
Okay.
Correct.
That still sounds right.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think we got a list. Did anyone see? No.
I can provide that.
Okay, that would be handy. Yeah, just more information for us, more numbers. Heck, we love numbers. Okay, that was motor pool. No questions from council. Okay, public, you want to talk about the motor pool? See, this is kind of fun. If we had 50 people here, it could be problematic.
Sue,
That's
Sue,
okay.
when have you seen 50 people here? Come on, man. Wow. So as the MC stated, this is basically was funded through a depreciation schedule. So it was an art, not a science. You never know how the inflationary factor or what size of equipment somebody might come up with that they want. Who knew that electric wanted to buy a major excavator, So the depreciation funds this. I'd ask this of council today, I'd ask you to reinstate the motor pool back to the 2022 schedule and add the 330-ton item that Harbor has for SMIC in there until such time as administration sits down and breaks this beast apart. We should be on some type of a rotating schedule to look at this thing. Every 5 years, we ought to see what each department's put into it. You don't want to tax any one department or enterprise more or less. They ought to be able to just fund their stuff, but they ought to be able to see, I'm putting this much in, I'm taking this much out, I'm generally in the ballpark. So it'd be good for the public to see that from a transparency standpoint. See what this schedule looks like, what the departments are putting in when these vehicles are rolling in and out. And then like was asked, to see a CIP schedule for the motor pool would be helpful as well. So ask for your consideration on that this year and ask administration to get an updated schedule to you. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the motor pool? Okay, seeing none, that pretty much concludes our presentations tonight. Council, did you have anything more to say within the committee of the whole format? Okay, seeing none, I will bring us out of the committee of the whole at 6:55. And we're back to our regular agenda, which brings us remarkably to citizens' comments. And this is the segment where you get 5 minutes on any subject you want. So are there any citizens that would like to speak at this point? Really? Okay, go ahead.
I had a few more things. It's intimidating going after Skip. He knows so much, and I'm just anyways. I wanted to, just as an observer, not a financial expert, but an observer, and I've been watching the budgets for a while. I'm a fairly conservative person. I see a 21% increase in revenue across the board in the general fund. And I'm comparing everything since 2019, and that's because something was so weird in the last 2 years, COVID. There was a 19% or over $200,000 in property taxes increase since 2019, a 21% or $825,000 in sales tax, 23% or $135,000 increase in bed tax, and over 210% increase in campground fees. And that's $977,000 from the budgeted numbers for next year to 2019. Those are some pretty significant increases in revenue for the city. I see a lot of, there's a 47, and I know some of this is unfilled positions, but there's just a 47% increase in personnel costs, and that as is significant. And I know a percentage of that is unfilled positions, and hopefully we get those filled, and then a 27% increase in non-personnel costs. This is just big picture numbers that I pulled out, and I would like to see our employee base not necessarily just growing government and increasing everybody's expenditures, but that we also do something for our year-round residents in our town. And of course, in my opinion, some of that year-round resident benefit could be a recreational facility. I know we had huge support for the recreational facility. We had a great presentation, and we've got significant increases in revenue over the next few years for our city. And I know a good chunk of the Parks and Rec money needs to go towards deferred maintenance, because that's been needed for a long time, and I applaud the current administration and council for working on so many of the deferred maintenance issues that we've had in our city. But I believe we can get those taken care of in the next couple of years, and then we're still going to have over 200% increase in in camping fees, and we could easily allocate some of that, or $300,000 in credit card fees. We can find the money within our city's budget to fund the recreation facility, both construction and operations, with the money that is already coming into the city. Maybe we need a recreational service area so that everybody has some skin in the game all the way out to the Y. But I firmly believe with these numbers and this kind of revenue and this kinds of projections, it's several years out. We can get the deferred maintenance taken care of and then take care of our citizens, but give our elderly people a place to walk. Give our middle-aged people a place to walk in the wintertime, and our kids a place to recreate, and a place for people to get together and celebrate. We need that space, and we need, it's not in here anywhere, but I'd love to see some allocation for beginning some preliminary engineering, or just planning, because a lot of what the Victus provided was not necessarily what we need. We don't necessarily need more basketball courts. We need a turf. Or is that what we need? We need to have a discussion. It would be an easy thing to change and amend the plan that was presented to us and decide what is it exactly that we want as a community. And I'd like to see some of that planning and possibly engineering put into the budget so that we can continue moving forward in something that I know, I've been here for 25 years, it's been a priority for the community for many, many decades. There's room in our budget to build, bond, and operate. And it would be a consolidation of services that we're already using into one location. Maybe the senior center doesn't need to be there. Maybe we can find another use for that space. But I do firmly believe that we can afford this, and our community wants it. There was overwhelming support for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. All right.
Norm Regis, outside city limits, but I'm talking about the harbor budget. So one thing I forgot to mention, that in the harbor budget and its revenue that's missing is the passenger fees. It's not in there right now. But there's an expenditure for passenger fees. So they need to offset itself. It's not in the budget right now. And I think that will help my budget look a lot better than it does. It's not in there, so it needs to be put in. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Took me a little while to gather my thoughts.
Okay, we still need your name.
Skip Ryerson,
Sorry.
inside of city limits. My thoughts are this, you have a challenging job ahead of you, this council, to pass the budget this year. We've gone through 3 years, since 2019, we've gone through the vortex of COVID. We've gone down the valley, we've gone up the hill, we've risen very high on our revenue projections and growth on sales tax, property taxes. So it's a whole kind of hand of cards that you've been dealt to figure out the budget that's needed to properly run the city, keep an eye on budget creep, keep an eye on personnel. It's our biggest cost center, it's our biggest asset in the organization to provide the services that this community needs. And then once you decide what kind of city we should have as far as services for our community, then you'll have an opportunity then to look at other ventures in our community that require capital. But you have a daunting task ahead of you because it has been a very tumultuous 3 years. So thank you for your service, and I won't be able to be here with you at your last meeting. I didn't expect that one, otherwise I would have delayed things even more. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any other folks out there wishing to speak? I don't see any folks out there or people wishing to speak. So I'll bring it back to council and administration comments and responses to citizens' comments. Administration.
I don't have a lot. Thank you for your time. I feel like in general the budget process has been a lot smoother this year. Just want to thank MC and the whole team at Carmen Jackson for their assistance, and also for finance. And yeah, it's good to see a smooth budget process. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember DeMoss.
Yes, first I'd like to thank Sully. I appreciated the thorough introduction tonight, and I love that you're going to school and all the progress that you've made here in your position. I appreciate all your hard work on the budget. And also thank you to all the department heads for all your work. Rob, I know it must have been tricky to try and figure out a forecasted budget when we're not quite sure where things are landing. And Mike, I really appreciate your comments about the school officer, so I would really like to look into that and figure out if we can get that back right away. And I always appreciate, Skip, your comments. I know it must be frustrating for you sometimes because it is your profession, so I know that people don't look at it as deeply as you do, but we do appreciate it, and thank you for being here, and that's all I have.
Okay, Councilmember Finch.
I echo what Liz is saying, but the resource officer has me highly concerned too. I've got a grandson I pick up every day. Well, I agree with you. I'm definitely going to look into that.
That's it? Okay. Vice Mayor Osenka.
Yeah, thanks, administration, finance, the department heads that made the presentations. Thanks for the comments from citizens tonight. All very good ideas and information. Sorry for being late. My bad. And be safe out there.
Okay. And I'll echo what everyone else said. Resource officer, I hadn't really thought about that, but I also have a grandson. We meet each other sometimes picking up. And it would probably be more at the high school, but still, it's a valuable thing, so we will look into that. Many good suggestions, and there is a lot to process. And so when this comes back, we will be making some suggestions, and this is still a process. So our next actual meeting now is not until the 14th, right? Seems like we've been meeting every day or something. So that was the end of the presentation part, and city business goes on. I did want to, totally unrelated, mention that the carnival last night for the kids, the Halloween carnival, was really nice, really good, and a nice safe place for our kids. So Seward does have a lot of stuff, I was just very pleased with that. And with that cheerful note, I will adjourn this special meeting at 7:05.